Alrighty everyone, I want to welcome you to the Lost Legion Vanguard Gaming channel. This will be my first upload to the channel by myself, but today we are going to go through a Nubatama standard deck profile. I've done pretty well with Nubatama in the past. I've been to a few regionals and I've placed best 12th at Chara Expo out of about 700 people in standard, which was really amazing. And this is the deck profile that I took there. I have changed up a few things since then, and we will talk about that as the video progresses. But to start off things, we'll start from grade 0 and we'll work our way up. Of course, I run the When Wrote Upon Draw starter. I run the new one because the old one is kind of a Magatsu unit, and I've been running a lot of the tokens mill lately. And so that's what I really like. Also, it gives you a really nice draw in the beginning early game in case you have a really bad hand. We'll go on to the triggers right now. I start off with 8 critical triggers, pretty standard. I really like the aggressive fast pace as to how this deck runs, and the more pressure that you put to your opponent is really unexpected to them, because a lot of the times this deck plays out really slow based on a lot of the grade 3s that I've put in the deck. But having that extra potential to crit someone off of a drive check is really, really important. So we run the 8 crits. Next up, we do standard 4 draw PGs. I don't think the grade 1 perfect guard's the one that allows you to draw when placed on Vanguard Circle, and the discard one is that good, because the grade 1 slots for this deck are really, really, really tight. And I will show you guys that once we get to the grade 1s. I've done numerous playtesting with so many different grade 1s, and there's just not enough space for the perfect guards. Otherwise, I would take these out, put in maybe 2 extra draws instead of the 2 draw PGs, and maybe put in 2 crits. So then I'd have 10 crits. But for now, we have the 4 draw trigger PGs. And then finally, of course, we have 4 heals. You don't want to go without them. They help out. They have 20k guard. And they're just really, really good. Of course, you don't want to die. However, once 16 crit comes out, you can definitely see that coming for me soon. I love to YOLO it. So now that we got the grade 0s out of the way, we'll go into the grade 1 lineup. I've unconventionally done a little bit different. I've done all my grade 1s and 3s. So we'll start off with the Tatoribue, which came out in Infinite Deity Cradle. He's the one that states when its attack hits on Vanguard Circle, you get to draw an additional card. I just think he's really good early game and late game, especially if you have that grade 0, because it has that continuous ability to get 5k on your turn if you have a grade 0. And since this deck specializes in tokens anyway, you're definitely going to want to have this guy on Rearguard Circle or Vanguard Circle. And sometimes your opponent does not want that Vanguard attack to hit, so therefore they'll cost a guard in the early game just to sacrifice you getting a draw. So essentially you're already negging them cards in the early game. So I think that's a really powerful addition. I've been kind of debating on having it at 3 or 4. I'm not exactly sure, but now it sits at 3, but it's definitely almost good enough. Actually, it is good enough to go up to 4, so we're definitely going to tweak with that later on. And then, of course, we have our countercharger, Sakura Fubuki. This guy, really, really powerful. When placed, if you have 3 or more units, discard a card, draw a card, you get the counter charge and 3k. So essentially it's already hitting early game, which is nice, like, especially if you have those grade 2 10k units that your opponents like to play on the Vanguard Circle. They're hitting already, which is really nice instead of the 8k. So a lot of the times I like to put these in the front row early game, especially if I have Magatsu Gale, the grade 2, just to bounce it back to my hand. Free counter charge, which is really, really nice. Also, cycling for cards early on is just really, really important, because a lot of the times I've found that you don't always need triggers in your hand. And then just cycling for those really good grade 1s or grade 2s that you need. Even a grade 3 if you don't have one is just really, really powerful. And you get the counter charge out of it early game. And so I found, and especially this deck is really counterblast heavy and soul heavy, but the counterblast is very important, so you definitely need the counter charge. And he's better than the grade 1 counter charger that we got in a previous set with Jamil Congo. The one where you put on the guard circle and you get the counter charge, but that one requires you to have 0 face up. This one you can have 1 face up, and you can still do it, which is really, really nice. So we're sticking with him for now. Definitely good enough to go up to 4, and I've tweaked with that many times, but the grade 1 slots are really tight. And then next, we have one of the best activators for tokens in the deck. We have Kirogiri, came out in Infinite Deity Cradle as well. And he's just really good. When placed, actually it's not even when placed, it's an axe skill. You Soul Blast 2, and you get to bounce him back to hand. And that's really powerful because you always want activators for tokens, and you always want your tokens on the field at all times, even after you activated Hanzo's skill, which he's just really good, comes back to hand. And not to mention, in a future video, he's really good with Magatsu too, because you just get to come back to hand, it activates Magatsu's skill, really good, and you just get a bunch of stuff. However, because it's an axe skill, then you're going to have to activate Magatsu's skill right away, so I've been tweaking with that, but there are so many different things that you can do. But back to the token build. This guy's really good, very important for those token generations, and he's definitely a major inclusion. This one I have stuck at 3 at. I don't think you need 4, because there are other grade 1s that are just really powerful in the deck. However, this one's just really standard for the token generation and really good inclusion in the deck. Can't go without it. Next, we have teched in a couple key cards that I've seen a lot of other people run these. This was in my deck from the start. Like, this card is just really powerful early game and late game. But it's very situational, because when it attacks or boosts, you get to soul charge from your drop zone if your opponent has 1 or less rear guards on the field. And it's really good with Hanzo, because more often than not, you're going to want to bounce all of your opponent's stuff back to their hand, unless they have really good when placed skills, and you don't want to do those all the time. But usually they'll have 1 or less face up, not face up, 1 or less on their rear guard circles at all times. So this guy's always going to proc. And I have him at 2 at just because he's situational. You'd hate to ride it because it's a rear guard skill, and you need the soul. But overall, really solid card. I had him at 3 at one point, but 2 seems really solid. I don't have any issues seeing them, because in the long run, you want it late game to begin with. So having him at the 2 is really good, because you don't want to see him early, but late game, you don't mind having that extra soul. So really good card. Very, very solid. And my final tech that I had was this guy, Obro. He came a little late to the build, but I found him to be quite okay, especially if I do not have token generation cards, or if I just don't have good cards in my hand at the time. So his skill is when placed Soul Blast 1, and I discard a card from my hand, I get to place a 0 from my hand, and then I get to draw a card. Now that may not sound really good, because you're losing a grade 0 on the field. That's potential guard. But however, on a Hanzo turn, this is really important, because if you have tokens on the field, you can bounce them back to hand and sack the tokens, and then you get that grade 0 back that you called out from this guy. And you also plussed a card because of it. Yeah, you did have to Soul Blast, however, you got that grade 0 back. So sometimes I've even put down draw trigger PGs on the field because of it. And he's only at 2 right now. I don't know if he's going to stay in the deck at this moment, but I found him to be okay and very situational. But he has won me some games where I didn't have a token generator, or I just needed to place a 0 down. I'd rather place a 0 off of this card to activate Hanzo's skill, because I get a draw. I don't want to just put the 0 down from my hand and kill it without a draw. So this is why this guy's really good, and 2 at is solid, but I don't think you need any more than that. Alright, now on to grade 2s. This one is no surprise. Magatsu Gale. He is a 4 of in every build possible. It doesn't matter what Nubatama deck you're playing, Premium, Standard, Magatsu, Hanzo, Jimeo Kongo, Kujikiri Kongo, it does not matter. This guy is at 4 at all times. He is just so unbelievably good. Just for a Counterblast and a Soul Blast, you draw a card and you get 6,000 power. I can't tell you how many times this has saved me when cycling, and I just needed an additional resource in my hand. Really, really powerful, overall good, and it's a good Magatsu generator as well, because he goes into the soul at the end of the battle if you want to return another card back to hand. which is just really, really solid. So one of the things I like to do early game is if I place him on Vanguard Circle or Rearguard Circle, then if I have 3 units, I can call this out, cycle, and then if this is on Rearguard, you know, I will usually have 1 counterblast used. I'm going to countercharge with this guy, sometimes maybe call out another one, so now I have 2 of these stacked with another grade 2 on the Vanguard Circle. Then now I've countercharged, this comes back to hand for another use, just to cycle cards. Really, really good draw cyclers here. I found him to be really, really, really powerful ever since he debuted. And, you know, he does not fail me. He stayed in the deck all this time, so way to go, Magatsu. And you will stay at 4 for as long as we know, unless we get better units. But for now, he's just a good cycler. Next up on the list, we have Zangetsu. Also debuting in Infinideity Cradle. He's a really, really, really good card. And he is the one that really, really puts tokens above the power level here. For one, on Vanguard and Rearguard Circle, he can generate a token, which is really powerful early game too, if you need that additional unit to activate the grade 1 skill to countercharge or draw a card or whatever you need to do. He's just really powerful. And not to mention his axe skill is not once per turn, so you can generate as many tokens as you have counterblast, which is really, really, really useful if you don't have the grade 1 to Soul Blast to get tokens. You can just counterblast twice. And not to mention, when his counterblast triggers, you get 5k to those tokens and they can boost. And they do stack. So I've had tokens at 15k, sometimes even 20k, just cycling out because, you know, I just needed big numbers. Really, really powerful. And people usually want this off the board. They either sack it or they attack into it. And another really good thing that I've saved is sometimes when they attack the rear guard, I have a token in the back row. This can interject with the attack, sending the token to the attacker, bouncing this back to hand, which is really, really powerful. It saves the resource. The tokens are really easily generated, and that's nothing you have to worry about. He was at 4 for a while, but the grade 2 slot is a little tight, not as tight as the grade 1. He might go back up to 4, but, you know, I have no problem seeing him at 3, and he's just really, really solid. So, Zangetsu, you've won in my book. The next grade 2 is a situational one, is Tsunemasa. He is not always useful, and more often than not, I don't actually activate the first skill. It's just really good only if you have a grade 3 Vanguard, and that's when you want to use them. So you don't want to see them early, and you hate to ride it. However, if you need just to ride a grade 2, go into him. It doesn't hurt, at least you get to ride that turn. However, he's good to soul charge because if you're at grade 3, you can target your Vanguard when placed, give it 3k, and if you target at a grade 3, you soul charge. So you can even target a grade 3 rearguard and still get the soul charge because you targeted a grade 3. And really good because you get the soul. It can sometimes feel for Jimio Kongo getting another grade 3 in the soul early. So instead of having to rewrite, you can already have that other grade 3, putting your opponent's hand down to 4 at all times, which is just really, really powerful. And not to mention, he's a good Magatsu activator as well because when he's done attacking, you can Soul Blast and bring it back to hand, which is just really, really good. But other than that, it's situational, not always used. But one thing I really like is a combo that I've been using a lot when I have them in hand. I'll show you guys that in a little bit. But he's really good just for constant soul generation and just coming back to hand for free. So I'll show you guys that in a little bit, but that's my grade 2s. We will now go on to grade 3s. All right, this also should come to no surprise for standard. Jimio Kongo. 4 of these guys, absolutely busted. Steals games, wins games, terrorizes your opponent, and they just sometimes just don't want to play with you. I've come into many situations playing with friends. They're like, come on, man, do you have to go into this all the time? And I said, yes, he's just that good. When placed, and at the end of each player's turn, your opponent has to go down to 6 cards. And then if you have a grade 3 in the soul, they have to go down to 4. Constantly. So their max hand size is 4. Talk about a perfect magic moment. Now, it's really good because you can cheat this out early with Tsunemasa, targeting the Vanguard, soul charging, hope to get that grade 3 early on your first ride. Really, really powerful. They have to go down to 4 before you can even ride twice. That's no surprise. So 4 Jimio Kongo, really good guy, used in premium as well for turbo. And now on to the main event. my favorite card, Akatsuki Hanzo. Really, really, really good unit. I love him. He is just super fun to play. However, he is a situational card. He's definitely not the best card that Nubatama has. You could even say he's one of the weaker ones, only because he can give your opponent's cards back in the hand that they necessarily want. And sometimes you may not always want to bounce, like I said earlier, bounce your opponent's cards back to their hand, because they may have really good when play skills. Like, don't, you know, just like a lot of when play skills, like with Kagero units, Pale Moon, stuff like that. However, Pale Moon always goes back into the soul anyway. But, you know, yada, yada, yada. I rest my case. However, he does have a really good skill on Vanguard, of course. You retire 2 tokens. You then can bounce any players at any amount back to their hand. And then if you, for every card sent back to your opponent's hand, they discard that many. So a lot of the times you want to get 3 to 4 out of that. And then you could say that Hanzo's skill is effectively off. Not to mention, if they're already at 4 because of a previous Jumio Congo turn, then they're just negging 4 cards at that point because they don't have a lot to work with. And more than likely, if you bounce when play skills back to hand, they may want to keep them. So then they're going to get rid of potentially good cards in hand, like a trigger or something. And also, this guy gets 20,000 power. So he's just a 32k beat stick, swinging on Vanguard. Already you need a heal trigger plus a 5k for it to be 1 to pass, which is really, really, really solid. And like I said, if they only have 4 cards, more likely than not, they probably held on to a perfect guard, so they have to discard anyway for it. So then that leaves them renderless at just 2 cards in hand for other attackers, which is just really, really solid. And he pairs really, really nicely with other cards like Zangetsu, because once you bounce that back, you can bounce, you know, the grade 1 back, you can bounce Zangetsu back if you wanted. If this is on the field, you can bounce this back to hand, activate it again, Soul Blast, Counter Blast, get another draw, set yourself up, get some nice boosters. And then if you have Zangetsu, Counter Blast, call it a token, which is just really, really solid. And then if you just want bigger numbers, call out Tatarubwe, because he gets another 5k if you have a grade 0 on the field. So that's just really, really solid plays. And I found him to be very useful at times. I found him to also be a hindrance at times. So it's really, really unpredictable as to when he's going to be good. But more often than not, your opponent's not going to want to see this because they're just knowing that they're going to have to discard. So now that we've got that out of the way, the final grade 3 that I run, maybe a shocker, I don't know, is Fuzen Congo. Also making his debut in Infinite Deity Cradle. I run him at 2. You don't need more. You don't want less. But 2 is a perfect number. He is absolutely nuts. This card does not belong in Nubatama whatsoever, but I think Bushy wrote for it because he is hilarious. On a Vanguard or Rear Guard, his skill can proc, which is really, 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 really good. Because sometimes you just want a really big Vanguard attack and you get Twin Drive, which is really nice, because then you can separate the powers if you get triggers somewhere else. But where he really, really shines is when you have a grade 3 in the soul when he attacks. If you have a grade 3 in the soul when he attacks, you Soul Blast, and then you bind any number of cards from your drop zone and bind them. And for as many as you bound, you get 5k for each bound. Now keep in mind, you have to have 5 damage for this, so it is a very late game unit. He is not something that you want to play early game. He is definitely going to waste in hand for a very long time, unless you just need another attacker. But I've always held on to him in hand. And very rarely do I ever have to ride him first, because I always see the other grade 3s first, which is why I just keep him at 2 and not 4. But the 5 damage is really, really easy to maintain unless you're playing against Force 2. Force 2 really, really sucks against this, especially if you're stuck at 4, because then you can never activate this unless you luckily heal out of it. But no one's going to take a 2 crit attack when you're at 4 damage. That just makes no sense, especially if you have the guard. But he's amazing. I've swung for 147,000 with him alone. I've swung with my Vanguard, either it being Jumio Congo or Hanzo, gotten 2 critical triggers, applied all the triggers to him, and swung, bound 23 cards from my drop zone, swinging 147k, 3 crit, And this guy also prevents you from using Sentinels. You're not allowed to Sentinel this attack. More often than not, 9 out of 10 times, your opponent will not have the guard for this card. And he steals games. He absolutely steals games. He is so much fun to play. And when the skill procs, it is just super, super, super amazing to see. And I'm glad that Nubatama has it. However, it seems like something Narukami would love, but let's not give it to them. And I wrap that up. That is my deck profile for Nubatama Standard, especially the Hanzo build. I really, really have been enjoying Nubatama. However, the support needs to come a little bit quicker, because a lot of these other decks are going to be really, really overpowering. With the Bermuda meta that's coming up, and especially the Excel meta, we see a lot of Protect clans getting sent to the wayside just because they're too slow. But if you can control out, which is what this deck likes, and just grind your opponent, you're going to be safe. And as it goes for Protect markers, I have an assortment of Protect 1 and Protect 2, just to change it up. I've been playing Protect 2 a lot more lately just because I've been having a lot of fun at locals, but more often than not, you're going to Protect 1 every single time. Alrighty, that wraps up, again, the Nubatama Standard deck profile. First time on the channel, representing my favorite clan ever since the game came out. I love it. I've been playing since G era, and it's just been super, super fun seeing them progress through the V meta. But I appreciate taking your time watching this video. If you guys like it, comment. Let me know what you think. Please give me some tips and tricks as to what your builds are. And if you want to see a premium deck list as well, I am surely willing to do that for you guys. Appreciate it. This has been Elijah with Lost Legion. You guys take care. Have a good day.